Finally, after 200 years of British rule, India gained independence from them on 15th August 1947. In this virtual tour of Indian economy from 1950 to 1990, we will be going to see the different types of economic systems and which one did India pursue, the economic planning, economic sectors of India and some of the problems associated with them and also improvement shown in them.
Economy system refers to an arrangement by which the three central problems of an economy are solved. It is a means by which societies or governments organize and distribute the available resources, goods and services across a geographical region or a country. Economy system regulates the factors of production including land, labor, capital and physical resources. An economy system encompasses many institutions, agencies, entities, decision-making processes and patterns of consumption that comprise the economic system of a community. All economy systems must confront and solve the three fundamental problems of an economy. Firstly, what kinds and quantities of goods and services are to be produced? Secondly, how are the goods and services to be produced? Thirdly, how are the goods and services to be produced distributed among people?
In this type of economy, the means of productions are owned, controlled and operated by the private sector. Production is mainly done for the purpose of earning profits, and the three central problems of the economy are solved by the market forces of demand and supply. The more profitable goods are produced in our country using the cheaper techniques. And the thing which we are working upon is a one drawback for us, that the distribution of production is done on the basis of the income or purchasing power of the people rather than on the needs and requirements of the people.
Anugasya. I am Chairman Ah from North Korea. Today I will tell you about the type of economy followed in my country. In my country, a socialist form of economy is followed. In this type of economy, all the means of production are owned and operated by the government. Here, in North Korea, the government decides what goods and services are to be produced in accordance with the needs of the society, since the assumption is that the government knows what is good for the people of my country, and so the desires of any individual consumer are not given much of an importance. The government also decides how goods and services are to be produced and how they should be distributed, given that the distribution is based on what people need and not on what we can afford to purchase. For example, a socialist nation like mine provides free healthcare to all the citizens who need it. But with all the good things, there surely is a drawback to the socialist form of economy. Here, we can't have any private property and everything is owned by the government. For example, in other countries like China and Cuba too, most economic activities are governed by socialistic principles.
The type of economy which we follow is a mixed economy. In this type of economy, the public sector and the private sector work collaterally and are given respective roles for solving the three central problems of the economy.
Now, the question that arises in front of us is that why did India, out of all economic systems, choose the mixed form of economy? After 200 years of British rule, the leaders of independent India had to decide, among other things, the type of economic system most suitable for our nation. A system which would promote the welfare of all rather than just a few. In this view, a socialist society appealed to Jawaharlal Nehru the most. However, he was not in favor of the kind of socialism established in the former USSR, where all the means of production was owned by the government and there was no private property. Since it is not possible in a democracy like ours to change the ownership patterns in the way it was done in the former USSR. A capitalist society, on the other hand, did not appeal to Jawaharlal Nehru, for it meant that a great majority of people of the country would be left behind without the chance to improve the quality of their lives. Therefore, Nehru and other leaders and thinkers of the newly independent India sought of an alternative to the extreme versions of capitalism and socialism. Basically sympathizing with the socialist outlook, they found the answer in an economic system which, in their view, combined the best features of socialism without its drawback. In this view, India would be a socialist society with a strong public sector but also private property and democracy. The government would plan for the economy, with the private sector being encouraged to be a part of the plan effort.
Economic planning and the goals of 5-year plan. Let us start with knowing what is economic planning. For the development of our Indian economy, it was pretty much necessary for our government to plan for the economy, which is known as economic planning. Economic planning can also be defined as making major economic decisions like what to produce, how to produce, and for whom to produce. There were two basic goals of our economic planning. First was to revive the poor and revive the backward and the stagnant economy. And there were two important steps which were taken by the authorities. The Indian Policy Resolution of 1948 was one of them. The IPR 1948 and the Directive Principles of the Indian Constitution assigned a leading role to the public sector. Private sector was also encouraged to be a part of this plan. Now, to make this planning effective, the Government of India set up a planning commission in 1950 with Prime Minister as the chairman. The purpose of this commission was to carefully assess the human and the physical resources of the country and to prepare the plans for the effective use of resources. This planning commission fixed the planning period at 5 years, which began the era of 5-year plans. It must also be noted that the Planning Commission is no more in existence, and on 1st January 2015, a cabinet resolution was passed to replace this Planning Commission with the newly formed Niti Aayog.
Goals of 5-year plans. The basic goals of 5-year plans were: first, growth; second, modernization; third, self-reliance; and fourth, equity. Growth as a goal of 5-year plans. It refers to increase in the country's capacity to produce the output of goods and services within the country. It implies either a larger stock of productive capital or larger size of supporting services. A good indicator of economic growth in the language of economics is gross domestic product. The GDP of a country is derived from the different sectors of the economy, namely the agriculture, industrial, and service sector. Modernization as a goal of 5-year plans. To increase the production of goods and services, the producers have to adopt new technology. Now, adoption of new technology simply means modernization. However, modernization is not merely limited to adoption of new technology, but also to the change in social outlook, such as recognition that women should have same and equal rights as men. A modern society makes use of talents of women in the workplace, such as in banks, in factories, etc. Self-reliance as a goal of 5-year plans. The first 7 5-year plans gave importance to self-reliance, which means avoiding imports of those goods which could be produced in India itself. This policy was considered a necessity in order to reduce our dependence on foreign countries, especially for food. It was feared that dependence on imported food, foreign technology, and foreign capital may make India's sovereignty vulnerable to foreign interference in our policies. Now, last one, equity. It is important to ensure that the benefits of economic prosperity reach the rich as well as the poor. So, in addition to growth, self-reliance, and modernization, equity is also very important. Every Indian should be able to meet his or her basic needs such as food, a decent housing, and education.
As you all may know, the agricultural productivity was stagnated during British rule on eve of independence. At the time of independence, the land tenure system was characterized by intermediaries who merely collected rent or lagan from the tillers of soil. The productivity of agricultural sector was so low that we had to import food supplied items from USA. The agricultural sector, which shared largest share of workforce, accounted for 70 to 75%. But we had to face many problems during the time of 1950 to 1990. Problems like low productivity, disguised unemployment, high dependency on rainfall, outdated technology, and frequent conflict between tenants and landlords. Many policies were generated for agricultural growth, and one such policy is land reforms. Land reforms, which primarily refers to the change in ownership of land holdings. And the aspect of land reform is land ceiling. Land ceiling refers to fixing a specified limit of land which could be owned by an individual. The purpose of land ceiling was to reduce the concentration of land ownership in few hands, and also land ceiling helped in promoting equity in the agricultural sector. Land ceiling also led to abolition of intermediaries. By abolition of intermediary or zamindari system, it brought about 200 lakh tenants into direct contact with the government, thus freeing the tillers from the exploitation of zamindars and providing them incentives to increase the output, and thus there is a growth in agriculture. However, the goal of equity was not fully served by abolition of intermediaries, because in some areas the former zamindars continued to own large areas of land by making use of some loopholes in legislation. In some areas, tenants were evicted and zamindars claimed to be the self-cultivators. Even after getting the ownership of the land, the poorest of the agricultural laborers did not benefit from the land reforms. There were also many cases for the land ceiling legislation was challenged by the big landlords. They delayed its implementation, and this delay system was used by them to get the land registered in the name of their close relatives. One of the main point here that is to be noted is that land reforms was not successful in all the states. They were successful in states like Kerala and West Bengal because government of these states were committed to the policy of land reform. Unfortunately, the other states did not share the same level of commitment, and vast inequalities of land holdings continued.
At the time of independence, about 75% of the country's population was dependent on agriculture. Productivity in the agricultural sector was very low because of the use of old technology and the absence of required infrastructure for the vast majority of farmers. However, this stagnation in the agricultural sector during the colonial rule was permanently broken by the Green Revolution. This refers to a large increase in the production of food grains resulting from the use of high-yielding variety HYV seeds, especially in wheat and rice. The use of these seeds required the use of fertilizers and pesticides in correct quantities as well as regular supply of water. The application of these inputs in correct proportions is vital. As a result, the first phase of the Green Revolution from mid-1960s to mid-1970s, the use of HYV seeds was restricted to more affluent states such as Punjab, Andhra Pradesh and Tamil Nadu. Further, the use of HYV seeds primarily benefited the wheat growing regions only. In the second phase of the Green Revolution from mid-1970s to mid-1980s, the HYV technology spread to a large number of states and benefited more variety of crops. The spread of Green Revolution technology enabled India to achieve self-sufficiency in food grains. We no longer had to be at the mercy of America or any other nation to meet the food requirements of our nation. Like every coin has its two sides, Green Revolution also has some disadvantages and advantages. Talking about the advantages, Green Revolution helped in attaining marketed surplus. Marketed surplus is the portion of agricultural produce which is sold in the market by the farmers. Growth in agricultural output makes a difference to the economy only when large proportion of this increase is sold in the market. Fortunately, a good proportion of rice and wheat produced during the Green Revolution period was sold by the farmers in the market. It also provided benefit to low-income groups. As large proportion of food grains was sold by the farmers in the market, their prices declined relative to other items of consumption. The low-income groups who spend a large percentage of their income on food benefited from this decline in relative prices. Also, Green Revolution helped in maintaining a buffer stock of food grains. The Green Revolution enabled the government to procure sufficient amount of food grains to build a stock which could be used in times of food shortage or famines.
Also, there was some risk associated with the Green Revolution. It increased the disparities between small and big farmers. Since only the big farmers could afford the required inputs, HYV seeds, fertilizers, etc., thereby reaping most of the benefits of Green Revolution. Also, there was increased risk of pest attack. The crops were prone to attack by pests, and small farmers who adopted this technology could lose everything in a single pest attack. Fortunately, these fears did not come to be true because of the steps taken by the government. The government provided loans at a low interest rate to the farmers and subsidized fertilizers so that small farmers could also have access to the needed inputs. Since only small farmers could buy the necessary inputs, the output on small farms equaled the output on large farms. As a result, the disparities between the rich and the poor farmers were reduced. Secondly, the risk of small farmers being ruined when pests attacked their crops was considerably reduced by the services rendered by research institutes established by the government.
Subsidy is a benefit given by the government in the form of a cash payment, tax reduction, etc. to bring out desired changes by effecting optimal allocation of resources, stabilizing the price of essential goods and services, and redistributing income in favor of poor people. Agricultural subsidy means that the farmers get inputs at prices lower than the market prices. During the Green Revolution, it was necessary for the government to grant subsidies to provide an incentive for adoption of the new HYV technology. Agricultural subsidies play an important role in India's economy. Subsidies are among the most powerful instruments for manipulation or balancing the growth rate of production. It protects the weaker sections of the farmers in India. At present, in terms of agricultural production, India holds the second position all over the world. The major types of agricultural subsidies in India are food subsidies, fertilizer subsidies, credit subsidies, irrigation subsidies, power subsidies, and seed subsidies. The subsidies are distributed among the farmers according to a set of selected criteria that is on the basis of merit, income level, and social group. According to a report of OECD, the share of agricultural subsidies in the overall GDP was 0.6% in India compared to 3.1% to that of Philippines in 2019. Several arguments had been put forward by some economists in favor of subsidies. The government should continue with agricultural subsidies as farming in India continues to be a risky business. Majority of the farmers are very poor and they will not be able to afford the required inputs without the subsidies. Eliminating subsidies will increase the income inequality between rich and poor farmers and will violate the ultimate goal of equity. Subsidies are necessary in India for the poor and small farmers to enable them to make use of modern agricultural techniques. On the other side, some economists suggest that subsidies were granted by the government to provide an incentive for adoption of the new HYV technology. So after the wide acceptance of technology, subsidies should be phased out as their purpose has been served. Subsidies do not benefit the poor and small farmers as benefits of substantial amount of subsidy go to fertilizer industry and prosperous farmers. Also, it is a huge burden on the government's finances. Subsidies often promote inefficiencies. Over-subsidization could adversely affect environment and allocation of resources. For example, when water is supplied free to the farmers, then they may cultivate water-intensive crops even though the water resources in that region may be scarce. As a result, such cropping pattern will further deplete the already scarce resources. Similarly, fertilizer and pesticide subsidies result in the overuse of resources which can be harmful to the environment. The amount of agricultural subsidies is increasing year by year, but the number of dependents is very large in India. Necessary steps should be taken to ensure that only the poor and needy farmers enjoy the benefits of subsidies and not the fertilizer industry and big farmers. The government should take serious measure for the development of agricultural subsidies.
Foreign trade. Foreign trade in India includes all imports and exports to and from India. India entered into the planned development era in 1950s, where in the first 7 plans, trade was characterized by an inward-looking strategy, which in technical terms is known as import substitution. The term import substitution refers to replacement of imports by domestic production. In simpler words, instead of depending on foreign countries for the imports of finished goods like vehicles, domestic industries would be encouraged to produce the same goods within the country itself. Thus, import substitution was essential for India to achieve self-reliancy as well as precious foreign exchange, which would otherwise be spent on imports. Two steps were taken by the Indian government to limit the imports. First one, by imposing tariffs. Tariffs are taxes which are levied on imported goods such that their price becomes more expensive and thus would lead to discourage their use. Second one was by fixing quotas. Quotas refer to the fixation of maximum limit on the imports of a commodity. So even if the industries were willing to buy imported goods at high prices, fixation of quotas would ensure the restriction of imports. As a result, domestic firms could expand without the fear of foreign competition. Critical appraisal of industrial development from 1950s to 1990s. Achievements. The proportion of GDP contributed by the industrial sector increased from 1950s to 1990s from 11.8% to 24.6% respectively. Such a rise in the industry's share of GDP is an important indicator of development, as well as the 6% annual growth rate of industrial sector during this period was also quite impressive. Second, the Indian industry was no longer restricted to cotton, textile and jute. The industrial sector became well diversified by the 1990s, largely due to the public sector, and it included engineering goods as well as a wide range of consumer goods. Third, the promotion of small-scale industries gave opportunities to people with small capital or inadequate capital to get into business. New investment opportunities helped in generating more employment opportunities and thus promoted growth and equity. Fourth, protection from foreign competition through import substitution had enabled the development of indigenous industries in areas like electronics and automobile sectors, which would otherwise could not have developed. Fifth, licensing policy. This policy helped the government to monitor and control the industrial production. And sixth, the public sector, which made a remarkable contribution by creating a strong industrial base, developing infrastructure, and promoting development of the backward areas of the country. Drawbacks. Number 1. Import substitution policy. Although this policy was necessary for the indigenous producers to learn to compete, this policy failed to develop a strong export sector, as it mainly emphasized on limiting the imports and thus saving the foreign exchanges. Second, lack of competition. Due to such restrictions on imports, the domestic producers knew that the only goods which would be available in market were their own produced. Thus, they made no efforts to improve the quality of these goods, and this ultimately affected the Indian consumers. They had no choice but to purchase whatever was produced and available in the market. The domestic industry failed to achieve international standards of product quality. Third, the licensing policy. Although this policy helped the government to monitor and control the industrial production, however, excessive regulation of these licenses led to the misuse of such licenses by the big industrialists. They would obtain such licenses not to start their own firms and businesses, but to prevent their competitors from starting new firms. Also, the procedure to obtain a license was very complex and cumbersome. So, a lot of time was spent by industrialists in trying to obtain the license only.